Welcome to episode 243 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer Luke Del Tredici. He has an extensive background in television writing, so we talk through that part of his career and how he got his start in TV writing. He also just did a feature film called Arizona, so we dig into that film as well, the writing, how it was ultimately produced. So stay tuned for that interview. Just a quick bit of follow-up from a couple of weeks ago. Shore Scripts ran a logline contest for SYS listeners, and a winner has been chosen. The winner is Tim Brothers from Sydney, Australia. A big congratulations to Tim, and thank you to everyone who submitted, and good luck to Tim and anyone else who submitted to the Shore Script screenwriting contest. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 243. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline inquiry letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now just a couple of quick words about what I'm working on. As mentioned over the last couple of weeks, I'm in the final stages with my crime thriller feature film, The Pinch. A couple of updates. I'm still working to get the deliverables over to the aggregator. It's always something, and just to give you kind of an idea of what I'm dealing with, fairly minor technical issues, but the trailer that we cut is actually on my computer and I'm on a Windows machine. I'm literally recording this podcast now on that same Windows machine. And for whatever reason, in Adobe Premiere, they don't have the Apple codec. It's the Apple ProRes 422 codec to output on when you're using a Windows machine. If you're on Premiere on an Apple machine, you have that codec. And for whatever reason, the aggregator specifically wanted that codec, so I couldn't do the trailer out, so I had to go back and forth with them a little bit, and they're now telling me that I can use a free Avid codec that I have to just download. So again, just kind of minor technical issues like that, just logistical stuff, just getting things to them, and then hopefully I'll have that all worked out this week and can actually set a date for when the film will be released. And then the other thing I've been doing, I've mentioned this as well, is trying to set up a theatrical screening through a service called Tug. And Tug, basically, they have these relationships with theaters around the country, and you can go to their service, and I think it's literally just tug.com, and you can enter your film in, get your thing up there, and then you can basically rent a theater through them. But they have certain thresholds and minimums, and so that's kind of where the stumbling block was. They have this sort of minimum threshold, and the main issue, though, really is you have to promote the tickets, and that's a big but. They set the screenings up. They have these relationships. Very easy, and all I had to do was mail them. It's called a DCP of the film. It's just a specific format to show the film that movie theaters across the U.S. can basically take this DCP and run it through their system. So you have to output the DCP. I did that. I sent that to them, got in the system. That was a pretty simple process in terms of those deliverables. And then I set up the first screening, and what it came to, and I know that they told me this isn't for every screening, but different areas of the country obviously have different minimum thresholds. So in LA, at least, their minimum threshold was 95 tickets, and they were selling them at $12 each. So that's basically $1,200 worth of tickets that I have to sell. Now, I have a podcast. I know a lot of people, and hopefully I could sell that many tickets, but I don't know. That seems like a lot of tickets to sell, but the thing is you as the filmmaker, you don't start making money until that $1,200 threshold has been hit. So maybe I can sell that many tickets, maybe I can't, but in any event, I don't think I can sell a lot more than 95 tickets, and then I'm basically doing this whole thing. There's no money in it, so I start to wonder what I'm doing it for. But the bigger issue to me was when I was looking around and thinking about doing a cast and crew screening, around the Los Angeles area, I was actually going to theaters directly. And I didn't go to this specific theater, so I don't know exactly, but most of the theaters around LA, in that let's say to $800 range, you could rent a theater. And this screening that I was going to do through Tug, it was like, 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. So it wasn't the weekend, but, it was a decent time slot on a Thursday night. And again, I was finding theaters around LA that would do this for me in that $600-700 range. I think I might have even had one that was like $550. So to me, that kind of brings up the whole thing. Like, what exactly is Tug doing? I mean, I could just rent the theater myself, set up my own buy now button, and then, then if I sold $1,200 worth of tickets, at least I would make $600, as opposed to having to hit that threshold and still not making any money. So that's kind of where I am with that. I don't, nothing is set in stone, but I'm probably not going to do that theatrical screening. It just seems like a lot of work, and I question how much real return on investment I'm going to get out of that. So that's where I am with the Pinch. My teen comedy feature film wrapped shooting last week. I mentioned this probably a month ago or 2 months ago. They started shooting, and they shot some of it in Norway. They shot some of it in Pennsylvania. It's an English language American script, so it takes place a lot at school. They did a lot of the interiors and stuff over in Norway. A lot of the filmmakers were from there, so they had a lot of assets that they could do. But then they shot a lot of the exteriors and stuff in the United States, in Pennsylvania specifically. And I think in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, they shot that stuff. And so it'll be an American film, an English language film, but they actually shot half of it over in Norway. So that's so cool. It's called Josh Taylor's Prom Date. You can see the cast and crew listing on IMDb. So if you're curious to learn a little bit more about that, do just go to my IMDb page. I've seen a couple of behind the scenes type of shots, but I haven't seen any of the actual footage. Certainly no rough cut or even any rough cuts of scenes or anything like that. So looking forward to that. Should be fun. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing writer Luke Del Tredici. Here is the interview. Welcome to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up, and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
I mean, I grew up in Boston. I don't know. I just loved movies. I loved movies from an early age, and that was all I ever wanted to do. It was somehow find a way to write or direct movies. I thought I went to Wesleyan in Connecticut, undergraduate, but it has a great film program there, and I studied film. I majored in it, and then I moved out to Los Angeles pretty much right after college to pursue a career in writing. And the only sort of left turn I took is I had a writing partner at the time, and we went into TV, and I don't really know why I did that, but I think movies were really super important to me. Also, I really liked judging other people's movies and saying what they had done badly, and I think I was a little scared that I would try to write movies and be terrible at it, and I didn't have as much emotional investment in television, so I went into TV, and then I worked. It was a little bit relatively slow. I worked at some terrible children's shows. I worked on a couple TV shows, network TV shows that got canceled before they even aired, or aired 6 episodes and went away. And then slowly I started working on some better shows. I worked on a couple shows for HBO, and then I transitioned on to writing on 30 Rock, and then when that ended, I moved back out to LA. I'd been in New York for a little while, and I moved back out to LA, and I spent the last 6 years sort of writing and executive producing Brooklyn Nine-Nine on Fox and now NBC. So largely I'm a TV writer. It's been, I write comedy, but then sometime 10 years ago, I had a little break between 2 shows, and I had this idea for a movie that I'd always wanted to write, and I was sort of itching to write something a little bit darker and a little bit more serious than the straight comedy that I was writing in TV. And I wrote the script to Arizona in 2008, and then here we are, or 2009, and 9 years later, it on screens of some kind.
Yeah, perfect. So let me just go back on what you just said a little bit. You mentioned breaking into TV, having a writing partner, breaking in. Maybe you can talk about those early steps. Were you doing the typical stuff like getting in as an assistant and working in the writer's room, as an assistant? Maybe just talk about some of those really early steps of kind of getting that foothold in the TV writing world.
Partly because I had a writing partner, and it's hard to both get high. I mean, the path to becoming a writer's assistant and getting in the room or a writer's PA and then getting a job is that you get hired on the show you've been working on. And when there were two of us as partners, it's hard to find a sort of two assistant job. So it didn't seem like a great path. We sort of took the path of saying, like, we didn't. I think one thing that happens to a lot of people who end up as writers assistants or as PAs is the jobs are great and you're exposed to writers, and you make great contacts and you learn a lot about professional writing, but also the hours can be really, really long and exhausting. TV shows are writing hours are typically pretty tough, and then often the writer assistants have to stay late after putting out scripts, putting in notes, cleaning stuff up, and we decided to go the opposite direction, my partner and I, and worked in did non-industry jobs that were not taxing, that didn't take any emotional or intellectual energy on our part, and gave us room to write, because we just felt like what we wanted to do was just churn out writing, and that worked out well for us. That I should be said that I know plenty of people who have been assistants who are now have thriving writing careers, and it worked out great for them. There's no clear right answer, obviously.
Yeah. So you're just basically writing spec scripts in your free time. Did you then enter them into the fellowships? How did you actually get those scripts into the hands of people that could hire you? Did you get an agent manager first?
I mean, we had an agent pretty much right away. I mean, I don't even we met a guy who was a party, a barbecue of a friend of ours in Boston. My writing partner met a lawyer, an entertainment lawyer, who was our friend's. I related to him somehow, uncle or something, and he said that if we ever moved out of LA, we should just send him stuff, and he would send it around to agents if he liked it, and we did that. My writing partner at the time was great at that sort of stuff I'm terrified at, but he was great at sort of following up and cold calling and trusting, and when people said that they were willing to help us, taking them up on that, and so we called the guy, we sent him the scripts, and he sent it to an agent, and the agent signed us. I think he was not a very good agent. He never got us jobs, and it was sort of a crappy agency, but at least he would get us meetings, and that was enough at the time to feel like, as we were not working in the industry, but at least having an agent and being able to take meetings kept us sort of feeling like it wasn't all a stupid pipe dream. And then concurrently, we through another friend of a friend, someone, my roommate in college grew up with this woman who was a manager, Christy Smith, who's currently still my manager 20 years later, and she was then at the time working at this company Avalon, which was the American outpost of this British management company, and she sort of started working with us a little bit, just being on a friendly, just helping us out, and then took my writing partner and I on as clients, and then she helped us sort of moved to a slightly better agency, and then we started getting jobs, although they were crappy jobs, but at least we were working.
So in 2008, when you wrote Arizona, had you written a bunch of feature films, or was that your first feature? Obviously, at that point, you had done a lot of TV.
It's the first and only feature I've written.
Really?
It's exactly one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the only one. No, I mean, and I had always wanted to, but I had just been, you sort of start down the path of working in TV, and it was always, when I had time to write, it always made more sense to write another TV spec, to try to write something to sell in TV, to have another sample that would help us get a different kind of job. And so, and I think in 2008 when I wrote it, that was my writing partner and I broke up right around then. It was like relatively, it was relatively untraumatic as those things go. It was pretty amicable, but he, one thing, I think in the moment, you're in a writing partnership. You make sort of you sort of try to find a unified voice as a team, and I think both of us at the time, when after having written together in college and for a decade out of college, we're both ready to sort of find our own voices a little bit. And one thing that I was really interested in doing, outside of that partnership where we got along really well writing comedy, was writing something maybe a little bit darker and a little bit more genre-y was the thing that I was really interested in doing. And so the first time I had a little break after, being a solo writer, I just wrote this movie idea that I had been kicking around for 6 months.
Sure. So maybe you can tell us what is sort of the log line or pitch for Arizona, just so people can kind of get an idea about what it's all about.
I mean, I'd say it's a dark, darkly comic thriller set in the wake of the 2007-2008 housing crisis. I'd say it's a cat and mouse. I don't know, like thriller between a deranged like a homeowner who's lost everything, and played by Danny McBride, and Rosemary DeWitt, who's sort of the hero and audience surrogate, who's also a homeowner who's lost everything, but is also a realtor who sold people homes, and they have a sort of dangerous 24 hours spent in what is a largely deserted, brand new build community in the deep in the deserts outside Phoenix. It's a real thing. They built all these new projects in the like exurbs of Phoenix out in the desert, and they're supposed to be just rows of beautifully made McMansions, and then right as they completed them, the housing crisis hit and the bottom collapsed, and the prices tanked, and no one moved in, and the few people who had moved in were left largely just living in ghost towns.
So where did this idea come from? What was sort of the genesis of it? Do you have family out there? Were you spending time in Arizona? What is sort of the seed that sparked this idea?
No, I mean, I just started reading. I was, I think I was sort of reading about one of these new build ghost towns out in the desert, and it just immediately became clear to me that you had to sort of have a horror movie set out there. And I think it's less of a personal story for me, and more, I was very aware at the time, and I think I'm only more conscious of it now, of it felt like a inflection point in American history, and where this sort of death of, I don't know if it's like the American dream, but this idea that everything is always going to be okay, and that people can always just America is like the land of second chances, and it felt to me at the time, and it certainly feels now like maybe maybe everyone doesn't always get the second chances that they think they're entitled to, and that seemed like a very ripe area to write about, and the setting seemed so good, and I really
the way you guys and the way you guys have this film position, and I'm just throwing this out there kind of to get your thoughts. It's called Arizona. Your poster has that sort of postcard look to it. It's kind of a caper comedy, and the first thing that came into my mind was Raising Arizona. How do you position your film with a film like this? How do you position it to be the same but yet a little bit different from some of these other films?
I mean, that is a question for marketing.
Okay.
I mean, I'm always even the title is I'm terrible at that stuff. I as you just could tell from the fact that you asked for a log line and I spoke for 3 minutes. I'm real bad at the sales aspect of my ideas. I just never had a title. I hate coming up with titles. I sold it as the Untitled Arizona Project. It was shot as the Untitled Arizona Project. At some point, we all just decided that we were going to call it Arizona. I don't know. I mean, I think they've done a great job. I really love that poster. I think the trailer's really fun. It's really tough. I mean, I have zero insight into how to quickly get people on board with your idea. I just, to me, I wrote a screenplay that was indicative of the kind of movie that I wanted to write and that I would like to see if it came out, and that's always been my sort of guiding principle. Is I know that I would want to see this movie, and so so I wrote it.
So what did you?
It worked out in this case. It could easily not have.
Yeah. So let's talk about just the process of this. I mean, you're an established TV writer, so you've got a little hiatus. You write this spec script, Arizona. Who did you start to send it out to? Did you send it to your agent, and then he got it out there? Do you have a manager? Maybe talk about that process. Just going from.
I mean, I just
spec
to Yeah, I mean, look, I had TV. I think when I wrote it, I knew I was going to New York, for a TV show, so I had sort of a real comfortable hiatus where I think I had been on this one HBO show, The Life and Times of Tim, which had ended, and I knew that I was moving to New York for this other HBO show, Bored to Death, which was starting up, and I had a few months. So it was like a real nice hiatus where not only did I have time off, but I knew that I had a job waiting for me. So I was able to just write something without fear that it was like, write something I wanted to write without fear of like what it would, was it the right next step for my career? And so I took a chance and I wrote something that was very different than what I'd been writing, which was pure comedy. And I was very happy with the script. And I sent to my agents. I didn't even have a feature lit agent at my agency because I'd only been working in TV. I think they immediately passed it on to the feature lit people, and I think a lot of the feature lit people who got it handled largely comedy scripts, or were at least expecting it to be a broad comedy from me, because that was the world I was coming from, and I think it was met with a little bit of consternation at my agency, where people were like, didn't totally. I don't think everyone knew what to make of it. But one of the agents over there really responded to it and really loved it, and he did a great job of championing the script and sending it out, and really, like, I think he immediately saw what was interesting about it and what was good, and he was a great, like, he really helped sell it, and I mean, I wrote the movie for Danny McBride, though I didn't know him, and I at the time wouldn't have said I did, because you didn't want to not get him and piss off some other actor who you might want to play it. Sure. But it was, I was Eastbound and Down. Or season 3 had just finished, I think, when I wrote it, or around then, and I love that show. And it's another show that is both very funny and incredibly sad, and a great American tragedy, and also the funniest TV show ever made in some ways. And I just, like, I loved it so much. And as I was writing the character, it just became clearer and clearer to me that I was writing a Danny McBride character. And the script got over to Rough House, which is Danny McBride and Jody Hill and David Gordon Green's company, and they've done so much in TV and film that I really love. And I that was always my number one place that I wanted to set it up. I just admired their work so much. I loved Eastbound. I love Observe and Report, Jody Hill's movie that is just, like, similarly so funny, even then so dark and so unexpected. And it got over there, and I had another friend who knew their development executive at the time, who told them to, like, he had a stack of scripts on his desk, and my friend I was like surfing buddies with him and told him, hey, I think you should check out that script that's sitting on your desk. I think you guys would like it. And they did, and they liked it, and Danny read it and responded well to it, and they, I set it up through them, with the idea that Danny McBride was going to direct it initially. And I trusted those guys to, I think I optioned it to them for, not no money, but like a very, like, modest amount of money, just because I had the luxury of having a stable TV career. And so I sort of decided with the movie, I was like, those were the guys that I wanted to make the movie with. I wanted to be in business with them, and I would rather sort of take less money, take more time. I just made the decision that, like, they were the right creative partners for me. And so I committed to letting them have it,
Sure. So maybe we could talk a little bit about the writing process of Arizona. So you have this hiatus. How long did you have? And maybe talk about, how long did you spend outlining the script versus how long did you spend actually opening up final draft writing, scene descriptions and dialogue?
Boy, I do not remember how long. It was so long ago. I think I had like a couple months. I mean, I generally with projects, both TV pilots I've written and movie projects, I have a long gestational phase between, like, getting the idea and actually, like, writing it. I think this one was closer to, I had the idea for like a year and a half and been meaning to find time, and then I finally had the idea, and I just, like, finished a TV spec that I wrote that I had the idea like 7 years ago for. I finally got around to writing it. But I like to outline things. I'm big into sort of really knowing what I'm going to do. I spend a lot of time planning out exactly what every scene is going to be and knowing what it's going to be. I'm not someone who likes to just sit and write and then kind of find the characters and find the story on the page. Like I have a sort of that makes me very very terrified. So I like to just sort of know where I'm going. So I think I outlined it, and I think I had started that hiatus. I had sort of halfway outlined certain things and done a lot of the research that ended up in the movie, and then I just finished an outline, and then my outlines are so thorough that once I write, it's actually a pretty that process can go pretty fast.
And what do those days look like? So you've got your outline, and now you're starting to crank out pages. Do you write 4 pages a day? Are you more just write 16 hours a day and just get it done quickly? What do those days look like?
Boy, I mean, I'm trying to remember. I would write at like coffee shops. I never liked writing at home. I back then especially, I didn't have an office or anything. I like being surrounded by people. Although writing in coffee shops in Los Angeles is a huge bummer because it's just you and a billion other people with laptops, and you feel like you're so unspecial. It's such a you feel like such a fraud as you look around. You're like, I'm just one of a million. But I think a benefit of being a TV writer is, and I've worked much more extensively in TV in the years since, in the decades since I wrote that. But TV writing teaches you to like be a little less precious about your process and your craft, because you certainly now being a network TV writer, but even then working in cable, you come into it, it's a job. You come into your office and you sit and you write, and there's always deadlines, and as soon as you're done with one script, you're on to the next one. And there's no sitting around, and you don't have time to be like, have writer's block or wait for inspiration to strike. It's a job. And so I think that, it's great training to approach writing like a job. Yeah. I think, and for me, writing's never easy. I hate it when people are like, I just sit down and I write for exactly 9 hours and then I stop writing. Like, there's so much time wasting and me fucking around on the internet and playing on my phone, and you have good days and you have bad days, but I do think there's the discipline of just saying, like, when it's time to write, you just work at you work at it, and if you don't feel inspired that day, you just keep going and you push through and you try to find something, and sometimes you get a whole day and everything feels crappy and you go back the next day and change everything, but at least you worked.
Yeah, for sure. So what does your development process look like for Arizona? You finished up this script. Do you have a few trusted writer friends that you send your material to, and then they gave you notes? What did that process look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's just that. I sent it to people who I knew, like who I trusted, people who I thought that would respond to the material, and I got notes. And another good thing about being a TV writer is you're constantly collaborating, and you're constantly being rewritten, and you're rewriting yourself, and things are changing. And in TV, especially then, when I was just working for people, you get pretty used to being rewritten, and so like I'm not at all precious about changing stuff. You can't be in TV like there's no just sort of like my precious words. It's just everything is always in flux, and so I was happy to get feedback. I was happy to change as much as I can. My biggest fear is not that like I'll like lose my babies, but that I'll be like too. That I cling to stuff because I had like thought of it, or that you don't make things better. I'm always err on the side of changing stuff too much as opposed to keeping things the way they are.
So just a couple TV questions I'm curious about.
Sure.
Especially given the way you sort of describe the writing of Arizona, what do you typically get when you're writing a TV episode? What do you get from the writer's room? So when you sit down to write by yourself, do you have a pretty detailed outline? Do you have sort of the broad strokes? And does that differ as you gain experience? In other words, if you're the showrunner, I would imagine you get a little more liberty to just go write an episode, whereas if you're lower on the totem pole, they probably spend more time. But maybe talk about that. What does a writer typically come out of the writer's room with before they actually write their episode?
I mean, look, the reality is every show is very different. Like, there's not, shows sort of reflect the like personality of the showrunner, but also the number of episodes, also the quality of the staff, and but yeah, I mean, usually like on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where I've been since the beginning, it's like we send people off with pretty thorough outlines. But I will say, like, as the season goes longer and longer, as you stretch into episode 15 or 17 or 20, you're more and more up against it, and the longer you go into the season, the more you're sending writers off with half thought through outlines. In the beginning of the year, they're very thought through, they're very detailed, their jokes are pitched in them. The room has broken them, and the writer just has to kind of go out and execute that. And there's still a lot of work to do, but it is like you're getting a really hefty document. Towards the end of the year, sometimes you're just like, you're really sending writers off and being like, just figure it out, And so it can really depend on that. And you're also right that, depending on the writer, on who you're going to send off, we tend to just, you tend to just assign scripts in a pretty, it's you don't try to think like, oh, this writer will be good for this script. You just largely assign scripts based on seniority. You just sort of start at the top, and often the showrunner will write the premiere, and then the next longest tenured writers will write the next couple episodes, and down the line, and then by the middle of the season, you're letting the showrunners or the writers' assistants take drafts, and then it sort of starts over again. But we do try to, with younger writers who haven't been on the show as long, or don't have as much experience, you try to protect them by making sure that they have good drafts. But that again doesn't always work. And and then scripts come back, and certainly on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and this was my experience on 30 Rock too. It's like, even when someone writes a great draft, we rewrite it tremendously. Like, if you can keep 20% of your writer's draft intact, you've done an amazing job.
Wow.
Like, that's a startling level of like, if you keep 7 jokes in a 36 page script, you really killed it.
So what?
Because we believe.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say we believe in the value of you rewrite as a group, and the reality is, it's certainly in comedy that group writing is often, I think, is better. I mean, having 7 people who are all smart and have different voices, you often come up with much more rich and interesting stuff than one person on their own.
Sure. So if someone comes to you and they're new to this business and they want to break into TV writing, what specs would you recommend that they write? Original shows, existing shows. What would you tell someone that was trying to break in about writing specs?
I mean, all anyone writes now is originals. Like, I haven't, the last 3 years that I've been doing hiring, I haven't read any spec, spec episodes of existing shows. That's just not a thing anyone does anymore. Partly it's a practical thing, which is there are fewer obvious shows to write specs of. There's like, it used to be that there were the same, that everyone had the same sort of common shared pop cultural language, and you could write a Frasier spec or a Friends spec or a Seinfeld spec, and everyone knew what it was in comedy. Now they're just they're these splintered shows, and you could write a great episode of, I don't know what you'd write, BoJack Horseman or something. It'd be great, but there's a lot of people out there reading scripts who don't watch BoJack Horseman. So, I think a lot of people write originals. There's something, there's a downside to that, which is to say that, as I read it, an original pilot is much harder to write than it's you not only have to write good characters and good jokes, and you have to and set up tell a story in 30 pages and with act breaks and hitting good TV beats. You also have to come up with a concept for a show that's good, and that's often, if you're a young writer, that's it's really hard. It's really hard for anyone to have a great idea for a television show. And sometimes when I'm reading original pieces of material, I have to remind myself, being the idea for this is a terrible idea for a television show. And they're starting off in a bad place. But if you can get past that, the writing's pretty good. The joke writing's pretty strong, and their sense of how to structure a scene is good. But they made some choices where you're just this would never be on television, and it makes you But I would say I don't think you really have a choice at this point. I think you have to write original stuff. I would say it's good to sort of focus on. I know a lot of people are very fluid right now between movies and TV and drama and comedy, and it's great that there's so much movement. It's great for writers that there's so much movement between mediums and between genre. But I definitely think if you're starting out, it's best to pick something and focus on it. If you want to write comedy, write 2-3 comedy scripts. If you want to write drama, write 2-3 dramas. That's my experience. Is that we're more, it'd be, at least from my my experience hiring people, you're more likely to say like, I kind of like the writing, but the tone wasn't exactly right for the show. Do they have another comedy script that's like that we could read to see if we like it? And that sort of happens a lot. And I feel like if people only have a drama, you're kind of like, well, it doesn't help us much in giving them a job, you know.
Yeah, for sure. So how can people see Arizona? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like for it?
You know, I am so in the dark about it.
No worries.
I've been doing a really bad job of educating myself. Yeah, I think it'll be in theaters and it'll be streaming and on August 24th. I don't know which cities it'll be playing in. I know it's going to have a theatrical release. You know, I think it's. I would love it if people saw it in the theater. I think it'll. You know, the reality is, I'm like, I got 2 young kids. I never watch movies in the theaters anymore. I'm like, I love being able to stream movies from the comfort of my bed, and so I'm excited to provide the world with something to provide other parents of young children with something to watch.
What's the best way for people to keep up with you? Are you on Twitter, Facebook? Anything you're comfortable sharing, I can grab and put in the show notes.
I mean, I'm on Twitter. I think it's at L Del Tredici. Maybe it's at Luke Del Tredici. I do not tweet very much. I largely just tweet about new episodes of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But I don't have a huge social presence. But people should watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine on NBC sometime this year, probably in the winter, because it's a fun show.
Perfect. Well, Luke, I really appreciate your coming on and talking with me today. Good luck with this film.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Right, bye.
I just want to talk quickly about SYS Select. It's a service for screenwriters to help them sell their screenplays and get writing assignments. The first part of the service is the SYS Select Screenplay Database. Screenwriters upload their screenplays along with a logline, synopsis, and other pertinent information like budget and genre, and then producers search for and hopefully find screenplays that they want to produce. Dozens of producers are in the system looking for screenplays right now. I launched this service at the beginning of this year, and we've already started to see some success stories. You can check out SYS podcast episode 222 with Steve Deering. He was the first official success story to come out of the SYS Select database. You can learn more about all of this by going to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. When you join SYS Select, you get access to the screenplay database that I just mentioned, along with all the other services that we're providing to SYS Select members. Those services include the monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of 400 producers who are actively seeking writers and screenplays. Each SYS Select member can pitch one screenplay in this monthly newsletter. We also have partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads sites, so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These leads run the gamut. There's producers looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. They're looking for shorts, they're looking for features, TV and web series pilots, all types of different projects. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. Also, you can get access to the SYS Select forum, where we will help you with your logline and query letter and answer any screenwriting related questions that you might have. Also in the forum are all the recorded screenwriting classes that I've done over the years, so you'll have access to all of those as well. The classes cover every part of the writing process, from concept to outlining to the first act, second act, third act, as well as other topics like writing short films and pitching your projects in person. Once again, if this sounds like something you would like to learn more about, please go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer-director Boaz Yakin. He's had a long career as both a writer and director. He's directed such films as Remember the Titans with Denzel Washington and Safe with Jason Statham, along with a whole bunch of other films. And he has written a lot of studio films too, like Prince of Persia. He wrote Dirty Dancing 2, Havana Nights. He wrote From Dusk Till Dawn 2, and he also was a co-writer on Now You See Me. So he's got a lot of great information, so keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's the show. Thank you for listening.